Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really digging into a specific piece of ancient writing, the words found right there in Jeremiah chapter 22.
Yeah, it's a fascinating chapter, packed with messages for the leaders, the kings, and the people of Judah.
Exactly. Delivered through Jeremiah, right at a pretty critical time.
Ah.
So, what can we actually pull out from these verses when we look closely? Let's get into it.
Well, the first thing that hits you, I think, is how direct the message is right from the start.
Mhm.
It's a command from the Lord, and it's not just for the king hiding away.
Right. It's for him, his officials, and even anyone just walking into the palace, like the
Oh,
whole system.
precisely. Anyone connected to the center of power.
Mhm.
And the command itself, it's not vague at all, is it?
No, not just be good. It's
Right,
very
yeah.
specific.
Do what is just and right. That's the core. But then it breaks it down. Rescue the victim from the oppressor.
Mm-hmm.
Do no wrong, no violence
Mm.
to the vulnerable. The text names the alien, the fatherless, the widow.
Okay, so protect the marginalized.
Yes. And crucially, don't shed innocent blood in this place. It's like a blueprint for, well, just rule based on social justice.
So these clear expectations are laid out. What about the stakes? What happens if they actually follow through?
Well, the text paints a picture of continuity, of stability if they obey. It says, if you're careful to do these things, kings from David's line will keep coming through the palace gates.
With all the fanfare.
Exactly. Chariots, horses, officials, people. It suggests a strong, flourishing kingdom. Business as usual, in a good way.
Okay, so obedience equals stability and continued royal power. What's the flip side if they ignore the command?
Ah, that's where the language takes a really sharp turn. It's dramatic. The Lord swears by himself, no less, that if they don't listen, the palace becomes a ruin.
Oh, ruin. How bad?
Like a desert, like
Mm.
towns with no one left to them.
Mm.
Completely uninhabited. It even talks about destroyers coming, chopping up the fancy cedar beams and throwing them on the fire. Total destruction.
Wow, that's vivid. From chariots to burning rubble. And the text explains why, doesn't it? It doesn't leave you guessing the reason for the ruin.
No, it connects it back. It imagines people later, from other nations, looking at the ruined city and asking, why? Why did God do this to such a great city?
And the answer.
The text gives the answer right there. Because they have forsaken the covenant of the Lord their God and have worshipped and served other gods. So the failure in justice, in protecting the vulnerable, it's tied directly to abandoning their core relationship with God.
That link is powerful: social action, leadership integrity, and spiritual faithfulness all woven together. Then the chapter seems to shift, right? It zooms in on specific kings, starting with advice about mourning.
Yes, it gets quite personal. It says, don't weep for the dead king. Weep bitterly for the one who's exiled. Which immediately tells you a king has been, or is about to be, taken away.
And who is this exiled king the text means?
The text identifies him as Shallum, son of Josiah. We also know him as Jehoahaz. He followed his father Josiah, but, well, he's gone from this place.
Gone where?
Into exile. And the prophecy is blunt. He'll never come back. He'll die in captivity, never see Judah again. So mourn for him, the one taken away, not necessarily for Josiah who died in the land.
Okay, so mourning for the exiled, not the deceased king. Then the text hits even harder with a woe against another king. Who's this and what'd he do?
That woe is for Jehoiakim, another son of Josiah. He reigned after Shallum. The text really lists his misdeeds. Woe to him who builds his palace by unrighteousness, his upper rooms by injustice.
Unrighteousness and injustice.
It gets specific again. He makes his own people work for nothing, doesn't pay their wages, using forced labor, essentially, to build his grand projects.
Building a palace that way.
Wow.
And it describes the palace.
Oh, yeah. He wants grandeur. A big palace, spacious rooms upstairs, lots of windows, paneled with cedar expensive stuff, and even painted bright red. Luxury, extravagance.
But the text doesn't just stop at describing his luxury. It draws a comparison, doesn't it, between him and his father Josiah.
That contrast is absolutely key.
Yeah.
It asks this cutting question, something like, does having more and more cedar make you a king?
Good question.
And then it points to Josiah. Sure, Josiah had food and drink, his needs were met. But the important thing, he did what was right and just. And because of that, all went well with him.
So Josiah's success wasn't about the cedar paneling.
Not at all. It highlights Josiah defended the cause of the poor and needy. And that's why things went well. And right after that, the text drops this bombshell from the Lord. Is that not what it means to know me?
Wow. So knowing God isn't just about rituals or beliefs in this context. It's about actively doing justice, caring for the poor.
Exactly. It defines knowing God through righteous action towards the vulnerable. And Jehoiakim, He's presented as the total opposite.
How so?
The text says his eyes and heart are set only on dishonest gain, on shedding innocent blood, on oppression, extortion. It's a portrait of a leader consumed by greed and willing to use violence to get his way, completely against the commands at the start of the chapter.
Given that description, the prophecy about his end must be pretty harsh too. It seems like it mirrors his actions.
It's incredibly harsh. No one will mourn him, it says. It lists the usual laments, alas, my brother, alas, my sister, and says, nope, none of that for him.
And his burial.
The ultimate insult, really. He gets the burial of a donkey, just dragged out and dumped outside Jerusalem's gates, a completely shameful, dishonorable end for someone who chased splendor through injustice.
Such a stark image. Okay, so after Shallum and Jehoiakim, the chapter addresses a third king, Jehoiachin, also called Coniah, Jehoiakim's son. What's the message for him?
Yeah, Jehoiachin, the message for him uses this incredibly powerful image to show how certain his judgment is. The Lord says, basically, even if you were my signet ring.
A signet ring. That was like a symbol of
Yeah.
authority, right? Identity, trust, very personal.
Exactly. Close connection, delegated power. So God is saying, even if you were that close, that value, that intimately connected to me, like a ring on my right hand, I'd still pull you off.
Wow. So no position is secure enough to avoid the consequences. What is his fate, according to the text?
He's going to be handed over to his enemies, the ones he fears. It names Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and the Babylonians.
So exile again.
Yes. He and his mother are going to be hurled into another country, a place they weren't born. And the painful part, they'll die there. They'll never get back to Judah, the land they long for. It's final.
And after that pronouncement, the text itself seems to ask a question about him.
It does. It's quite poignant. It asks, is this man Jehoiachin a despised, broken pot? Like a useless piece of pottery nobody wants. And then why? Why are he and his children hurled out, cast into a land they don't know? The question emphasizes the rejection, the seeming worthlessness of his end.
And then that really dramatic call.
Oh, yeah. Oh, land, 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 hear the word of the Lord. That triple call, summoning the very earth to pay attention to what's being declared about the royal line and its future.
What is the final word on Jehoiachin's line? Does anyone succeed him?
The judgment is absolute on that point. The command is, record this man as a childless, a man who won't prosper. And crucially, none of his offspring will prosper. None will sit on the throne of David or rule anymore in Judah. It's the end of the line for his dynasty on the throne. Finished.
So, after dealing with these specific kings and their failures, the chapter sort of zooms back out, ends with warnings for the people more generally.
It does. It paints this picture of widespread sorrow and defeat. Calls to cry out from Lebanon, from Bashan, from Abraham, maybe places they saw as strongholds or symbols of security, because all your allies are crushed. Any external help they relied on, gone.
And there's a reminder in there, too, isn't there, that this wasn't sudden, they'd been warned before.
Yes, the text explicitly calls them out on their history. I warned you when you felt secure, God says through Jeremiah, but you said, I will not listen.
Stubbornness.
And it frames it as their lifelong habit. This has been your way from your youth. You have not obeyed me. So the disaster isn't random. It's portrayed as the outcome of persistent deafness to correction.
What are the final consequences outlined for the people, then?
Their leaders, the shepherds, will be blown away like dust. Their allies will end up in exile too. The result, shame, disgrace because of all their wickedness. And there's a final sharp jab at those feeling secure in their fancy houses, maybe echoing Jehoiakim's cedar palace. Those living in Lebanon, nestled in cedar. It warns them how they'll groan when the pain hits. Pain like childbirth, sudden, unavoidable, intense. A direct hit on those whose security was built on potentially ill-gotten material wealth.
Okay, so we've journeyed through Jeremiah 22, starting with that core call for justice, seeing the stark consequences promised for obedience versus disobedience, hearing these really pointed judgments against specific kings tied to their actions.
Yeah, especially Shallum's exile, Jehoiakim's greed and shameful end, and Jehoiachin's rejection and the end of his line.
Right, and ending with that wider warning to the people about their history of ignoring warnings and the coming suffering.
It really hammers home the connection between leadership, justice, covenant faithfulness, and ultimately the fate of the nation. The consequences described are just devastatingly clear. It's all interconnected.
So thinking about everything we've unpacked here in Jeremiah 22, that powerful contrast the text draws between Josiah, who knew God by doing justice, and Jehoiakim focused on gain and cedar and seeing the fates laid out for them and the nation. What does this deep dive suggest to you, our listener, about that enduring connection between a society's choices, particularly around justice and leadership, and its ultimate well-being or destiny? Something to think about.